Hello everyone, welcome to the Books of Morgan. I'm Morgan, and today I'm going to be doing my March wrap-up. In March, I read a total of 8 books, so I'm very happy with that. It's a good number in my opinion. I even read a big book that I was really proud of, and yeah, I have some really good reads that I want to share with you today. The first book that I read in March was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I've talked about this book in so many of my recent videos. I did a whole review of it, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. If you want to know more about how I felt on this book, please check out my review, and it has no spoilers in it or anything. I gave this one 5 stars. This was my favorite book that I read this month. It's absolutely fantastic, and if you haven't read it, please go do yourself a favor and read it because oh my gosh, so amazing. But if you don't know what Outlander is about, it is a time travel historical fiction novel. So Claire from the 1940s goes back in time to the 1700s in Scotland, and then there's a romance that ensues between her and a Scottish Highlander, and there's some political stuff going on too. It's just so good, and I think everyone should read it, but really loved this one. So the next book that I read is actually an ebook, and that is Wild at Heart by K.A. Tucker. I also read this over my spring break. This is the sequel to The Simple Wild. It came out in March. I had it pre-ordered, downloaded it on my Kindle because I knew I was going to be traveling the first week of March. So I got this book and I was so excited to read it. It follows Calla and Jonah living in Alaska. Calla is originally from Toronto, so she's like a city girl, like in Alaska. And the imagery is really cool. The discussions on like survival and stuff is great. The romance is steamy, so really love that. But this book was actually a huge disappointment in comparison to the first book. I absolutely loved the slow burn and like banter between Calla and Jonah in the first one, and like just everything that was going on in the first one. This one I gave 4 stars, so I still enjoyed it. I read it pretty quickly, but I felt like Calla's character actually regressed. Like I feel like she didn't develop as much as I saw her develop in the first book. It kind of felt like she was going back to her old like city ways. In this book, they end up buying a house, and she is getting money from her inheritance because her father passed away in the first book and he sold his company and stuff. And she ends up buying a hot tub, and like this is like a huge point of friction in Calla and Jonah's relationship. And it was really bizarre to me because after reading her perspective in the first book, she was kind of like, okay, yes, I need to live more simply and like not be so materialistic and like adjust to life in Alaska. But in this book, it was like that all went out the window, and she just ended up buying all this crap that she didn't need, and it was just really disappointing because I felt like she developed so much as a character in the first book, and like this one, it was like she took like 5 steps backwards. So that was frustrating to me. And yeah, Calla and Jonah's relationship goes through a few bumps in the road, and I was like, oh, this is so unnecessary. But I still enjoyed her relationship in general. Like I just wish there was more. Like this didn't need to exist, basically. So that's my opinion on it. But I gave it 4 stars because I still enjoyed reading it. The next book that I read was a book of the month. This is my first book of the month that I read this year, which I always read book of the month, so I needed to get to one. Anyways, I read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. And when I talked about this book in my TBR video, I said that it was like a Helen of Troy retelling. That is false. This is the story of Briseis, who was the lover of Achilles, and it's told from her perspective and like her experience in the Trojan War and like living with Achilles and like all this stuff like that, because she was basically his sex slave. Yeah. Anyways, I gave this one 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad book. It was actually a really good book. I just don't care about ancient Greece. If I cared about ancient Greece, I would have been a classics major, and I'm not. I'm a history major. I don't care about anything before the Common Era. Like, no. I just, like, there's nothing wrong with this book. I feel the same way about this book as I did about Circe. It's a really great feminist retelling of some ancient Greek thing that happened, and it's cool. It's just like, I just don't care. Like, I think there's tons of people who would love this book. I just could not care enough about the Trojan War. Like, that's like a me thing. So yeah, it's a good book. 3.5 stars. If you're interested in ancient Greece, if you're interested in mythology and Achilles and like his whole story, I think you would get a lot out of this book. I mean, it won the Booker Prize, so it is well written, and it's not a bad book. It's just not for me. The next book that I read is The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. This was my buddy read with Savannah from Reading in Room 301, also on BookTube, and we read this together. We both gave it 3 stars because we were just so like underwhelmed by the book. It's about this girl, Nina Hill, who works in a bookstore, and then she's a very introverted person, and then she finds out that she has this huge family because her dad died, but she didn't know her dad, and then she like meets all these crazy characters from her dad's side of the family, and he was really rich, so he left her a bunch of money and blah 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 blah, and like left her in the will. And there was like a lot of drama with that. But then there's also this like random love interest that pops up from her trivia enemy, like her trivia team's enemy ends up falling in love with her, and it was just like so much going on, and it was only 300 pages, and I'm like, why is so much happening when like it's just not well written? It just really needed to be edited. I feel like if you wanted to make it a family drama, make it a family drama, but don't just like sprinkle in this random romantic interest. Like, what was their chemistry? Like, there wasn't any. They had like 3 interactions and then all of a sudden they're in love. Like, what? So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I was just disappointed by this book. Too much is going on. I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh my god, this deserves to be in the trash. It's just like a 3-star book. The next book that I read was for my book club. My cousin and I are in a book club together, and I got to choose the book this month, and I chose Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I gave this 3 stars. I also didn't really care for this book either. I've talked about this book in a couple other videos, but essentially this follows Eleanor Oliphant, who is kind of a misanthrope, and she's just a very awkward in social situations, and she says and does things that are like really odd, and then you find out there's this whole childhood trauma and like crazy stuff that happened in her past, and it's very much like an introspective on this person, Eleanor Oliphant. It is not plot driven. Nothing happens in this book except for getting to know Eleanor Oliphant, which is a problem for me. Like, I love plot driven books, and I think if you're someone who really likes like slow, like character driven books, this is really good. I also thought this would have a romance in it because it kind of sounded that way on the back. There's no romance, like that's not happening. So and it was a little disappointing, so I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't what I expected it to be. Again, not a bad book, it's just really not for me. And it's like a contemporary fiction, like women's fiction novel. I can see how a lot of people would love this book. And then I read In Paris with You by Clémentine Bouvet. Anyways, this is a book told in verse. It is a romance book, and it is fine. I gave it, what did I give? I gave it 4 stars. Okay, well, I give this 4 stars because I liked the way it was written. I liked the language that was used. I do think it would be better if it was written in French because this is a book in translation. One disappointing thing was that it's like In Paris with You, but they hardly mention Paris. They really just focus on the relationship between the 2 main characters, which is fine, and they just so happen to be living in Paris, but I was just kind of like, oh, I was hoping for more elements of the city interwoven in here. Like, they don't even go to the Eiffel Tower. They don't like do like Parisian stuff really, and it follows these 2 characters. Who is it? Eugene and Tatiana. And Tatiana is a PhD student or candidate. She's just about to get her PhD. Eugene is this guy who works in a corporate office, whatever. They run into each other on the metro, and they actually knew each other from like 10 years before, when they were like kids basically, or teenagers. And there was like this one summer, and Tatiana fell in love with Eugene, but Eugene didn't like reciprocate those feelings, and it was like whatever. And then flash forward, and now Eugene is like obsessed with Tatiana and is like, I have to be with her. But then Tatiana gets a job offer in San Francisco, and you're like, what's gonna happen? Anyways, it was fine. It's a good book. If you like books written in verse, I think you should read it. I think it's like really beautifully written. I just wanted a little bit more from it. Like, the ending was just kind of like, meh. I don't know. I was not passionate about this book. I'll probably forget about it in like 5 years. Maybe 1 year, actually. And then the penultimate book that I read this month was Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. This is an historical fantasy mystery. So 3 genres right there. I had such a hard time reading this book. Like, my experience reading this book was not a positive one, and it was completely my own fault. It's not a bad book. It's just I could not, like, sit down and read this. Like, I don't know what it was. Okay, I read some reviews of this, and I think that this is what happened to me. It's a very slow burn. It is, like, it takes a lot to build up to what happens in the end. And I think that's, like, the case with a lot of mystery novels. Like, you're just, like, anticipating the big reveal or whatever, which is why I don't like reading mystery novels, because I'm, like, so bored by them. It's very, like, descriptive. There's not as much dialogue, which is a problem for me personally. I just wanted less, I don't know, I just wanted less descriptions in this book. And but it follows Bridie Devine, and she's this, like, quirky, like, private investigator who gets hired to search for a child who may or may not be a mermaid, and she goes down this path of, like, circus and oddities and traders and stuff like that. Her sidekicks include a 7-foot-tall housemaid and a ghost. And I'm going to spoil something right now, so if you want to, like, skip the next, like, 30 seconds or a minute, please do so. Bridie kind of falls in love with the ghost, which is, like, whatever. I don't care about paranormal romance, but there was one part in this book where she was like, I really want to have sex with this ghost, but I can't because he's a phantom. And I'm like, okay, that is, like, a choice that you are thinking about right now. Let's kind of reevaluate. And, like, the ghost actually falls in love with her, but he's like, I'm gonna find the light in the end, and then he leaves her, and it's, like, this tragic romance. And I'm like, he's an effing ghost. Like, what are you doing, Bridie? So that was, like, not a cute thing for me personally. So what I ended up doing with this book, because I literally just could not sit and read it, like, I was just not really grasped by the story, I ended up reading the audiobook for this, for about half of it, because I was just like, I cannot sit and read this. Like, I need to listen to the, like, I need to, like, do a puzzle and, like, listen to this. So that's what I did. And I think the audiobook was pretty good. The narrator did a variety of voices, which I thought were interesting, but it made my reading experience better. It helped me finish the book, because I probably would not have finished this without the audiobook. Essentially, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked the idea and the concept of this book. I liked the discussion of, like, mermaids and, like, science, and, like, that was really cool. And, like, the historical aspects were really cool, but, like, everything else about this book I just didn't care for, and that's totally a me issue. Like, I just don't like mystery books. I have found out a lot in March about what I like and what I don't like in books, and I find out that I don't like a lot of things in books, so that's good. It only took, like, 3 years for me to figure that out. But anyways, if you like dark mystery, historical, with a little sprinkle of fantasy in there, I think you'll like this book. It's not bad. It's just, like, I wish it was a little different. And I was excited about this book, I will say. Like, there were parts in it where I was like, oh my god, that's so creepy and macabre and cool. And I think this would be a really awesome, like, Tim Burton film. But, like, the book itself, I was just kind of, like, left wanting more or less. And then the last book that I read, I actually finished, like, 2 days ago, and I really loved this one. I had a good time reading this, and that is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. And this is a romance book. It's kind of smutty. It's, like, really fun. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. The reason I did not give it a full 5 stars is because I don't like sport romances. I discovered that when I read Intercepted by Alexa Martin. I was like, I don't care about football. It was kind of the same thing with, like, baseball. I was like, don't really care about, like, these baseball players and the drama between their wives and stuff. Like, I'm not here to read that. But that was so, like, few and far in between that, like, it did not ruin my enjoyment of this book, because it was just, like, so, like, fun and romantic and smutty. So this basically follows this guy named Gavin, which is, like, the widest name ever, but whatever. So it follows Gavin, and he's a baseball player, and he finds out that his wife, what's her face? Thea. He finds out that his wife, Thea, has been faking orgasms for, like, their entire marriage. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get divorced. Like, there's, like, other stuff going on. And I'm like, whatever. And then he joins this, like, book club that reads like romance books to like get ideas of like how to please their wives and like how to like go about romance. And it's like really funny and like, I don't know, it was just like a really enjoyable reading experience. It was a fast read, it was a flirty, fluffy read, like loved it. And I think that Gavin and Thea are like really fun together, so I enjoyed that. I did not like Thea's sister, Liv. I absolutely hated her, and I know that the second book follows Liv, and I don't want to read it because I don't like Liv, so let me know if it's worth reading, because is there any like character development? I don't know. But if you have read the second book, let me know, because I don't want to read a book about Liv because she annoyed me the entire time in that book. But yes, those are all the books that I read in the month of March. I am very proud of myself. I think I read some good books this month. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos from me, please hit that subscribe button. I come out with videos periodically whenever I feel like it. But thanks for watching. Bye!